Even though I realize it's strange, I must admit. Cooper changed my life in a manner I never imagined possible. It started off like any other evening, or at least that's how it seemed. But there was something special going on beneath the surface, a sensation that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Cooper, my golden retriever, loved Noah as much as he loved me, and Noah had arrived as usual. The three of us had always been a kind of trio that clicked, but that night everything changed in ways I couldn't have predicted. The atmosphere felt different, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was this strange energy hanging between us, almost like a thread stretched too tightly, the kind of feeling that makes you feel like you're on the edge of something, but you don't know what you've been through together. It felt like home, even more so than my real family at times, but I noticed that Noah was quieter than usual, as if he had something on his mind, but didn't want to say it. Finally, after what seemed like ages, he spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "You ever wonder if things could be different?" I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Nevertheless, for the time being, everything returned to normal. At least we spent hours talking about everything and nothing, slipping from one topic to the next. I gave Cooper a gentle prod, and he gazed up at me with his large, trusting eyes. Noah didn't laugh, though. Instead, he simply continued to stare at me, and there was a vulnerability in it that I hadn't noticed before. He answered, "No, I mean between us. Have you ever considered things changing?" His words lingered in the air like a half-lit cigarette. A part of me wanted to ask him if he meant what I thought he meant. I could feel Cooper shift next to me, his head resting on my leg, grounding me somehow. I was surprised, curious, and feeling something I couldn't name. We were close, sure, but we'd never had a conversation like this. Noah turned away when I inquired in a calmer voice, his eyes strained to Cooper, who was still lying comfortably between us. I suppose it's been too long since things seemed normal. Perhaps I am overanalyzing it. I wanted to ask him more questions to find out what he was really trying to say, but something stopped me, possibly fear of hearing something that could change everything, so we returned to our normal banter. Even though the tea lingered as a silent reminder that we had left something behind. After a while, Noah got up. Forget it. He forced a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I guess I should probably head out," he said, but it didn't sound like he wanted to leave. "Yeah, probably," I said, trying not to look him in the eyes, but before he could leave, Cooper came trotting over to him, wagging his tail as if he sensed that we weren't quite ready to end the night. Noah laughed and scratched Cooper behind the ears. "Sometimes I think he likes me better than he likes you," he joked. I was about to say something when Cooper bounded over to me and nudged his head into my lap as if he wanted our attention, Noah, but as he scratched Cooper's forehead, I couldn't help but notice how his hand lingered as if he was stalling for time. Suddenly, then, the tension vanished, at least temporarily. Cooper was sprawled across both of us, his head resting on my knee and his tail thumping against Noah's leg. It felt almost unreal to be sitting there with him, Cooper bridging the space between us. Perhaps it was the late hour, or perhaps it was the unspoken words that lingered in the air, but found myself feeling something new, something I didn't fully understand. We ended up sitting there for what felt like hours, talking little and just enjoying each other's company. It was strange, this quiet intimacy that had settled between us, a closeness that didn't require any words. Even though I had no idea what it meant, I didn't want it to stop just yet. Noah finally broke the quiet, you know. What would it be like? I wonder sometimes. His voice was gentle, bordering on hesitation, causing my heart to flutter. I tried to read his face, but he was staring at Cooper, his fingers idly stroking the fur on his back. "Noah." I began, but I couldn't finish the sentence because my mind was racing with a mix of curiosity, bewilderment, and a strange, quiet excitement that I hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked up. He met my eyes, and for a little time, everything seemed to stop. It was as if we were both standing on a precipice that, once passed, none of us could go back. However, he shook his head and laughed quietly. "Don't remember it. Making things strange wasn't my intention." "No," I answered hastily. "It's all right." I didn't think about it that way before, which wasn't really accurate, but I wasn't prepared to accept it yet. The night went on, and Noah did ultimately go. My voice was a touch too eager. I watched him depart, but not before he gave me a lingering look that I couldn't quite understand. I felt a weird mixture of relief and sorrow. I'd always treasured our relationship, but tonight something had changed, and I wasn't sure I was prepared to deal with it when I eventually went to bed. Cooper snuggled up next to me, his warm body a reassuring presence in the darkness. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the events of the night. Noah's words echoed in my head. I didn't know how to interpret it or if it held any significance, yet I couldn't resist the thought of what could occur if I allowed myself to contemplate it, if I allowed myself to envision a different world. However, once curiosity takes hold, it remains unwavering. As I lay there with Cooper's gentle breathing next to me, I knew that something had changed, even if I couldn't see it yet. There was an edge to everything now, a strange thrill mixed with nervousness. A few days later, Noah showed up at my door. Noah and I had expressed a sense of something breaking open, something we'd both been ignoring. Every text and call felt different, as if there was something we were both pretending not to notice, but couldn't completely ignore. Cooper was obviously happy to see Noah again because he raced up with his tail waving like a flag and barking enthusiastically. It seemed like Cooper always felt the same way about Noah, as if he detected a connection between us, or perhaps I was just dreaming. "Hello, Noah," said, leaning casually in the doorway, but his eyes showed a certain intensity. "Mind if I come in?" I said, trying to speak steadily. I opened the door wider and Noah entered. His eyes briefly met mine before drifting away. Cooper trotted between us, looking up at us both as if expecting something. We sat down on the couch, and Cooper jumped up between us, his head resting on my knee. Noah reached over and scratched behind Cooper's ears, his fingers briefly brushing mine. It felt like an electric shock, so slight but so charged that it caught me off guard. I quickly pulled my hand away, laughing awkwardly, but Noah didn't seem to notice. "Breaking the silence, have you?" he said. I hesitated, considering what I had said. "I haven't been able to stop," I admit, as I halted and looked down at Cooper, who was observing me with those large, trusting eyes. Noah gave it some thought and slowly nodded. He said with a faint smile, "Yeah, neither am I." As Noah's hand lingered on Cooper's furrowed brow and his gaze shifted between us as if he were struggling with something inside, there was a pause that went on for a little too long. I felt my heart race, wondering where this was. Finally, he spoke in a softer voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes I feel like Cooper is the only one who truly understands me." "You know," I agreed, looking at Cooper. "Beyond simply being a dog, he is, well, family." Noah nodded, keeping his hands on Cooper's back precisely. "You know, he just understands. Like he can tell when we're anxious or upset, and sometimes I wonder if he can see what we're laughing at, but there was a tinge of anxiety in it. He, I believe, knows us." Cooper moved between us, stretching out and resting his head on my lap with his tail thumping lightly against Noah's leg. "Do you ever feel like things are meant to happen, like there's something guiding us?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps he does. Perhaps he's just waiting for us to figure it out." Sometimes Noah looked at me with a knowing look in his eyes. Now, the tension was nearly unbearable, a blend of excitement and hesitation, as if we were both perched on the brink of disaster. I drew away from him. For a brief moment, it seemed as though everything had changed. We both knew that there was no turning back from this. The silence was heavy and full of unsaid words, and I found myself leaning slightly closer as if drawn by something outside of my control. Cooper looked up at us both, his eyes wide and curious, almost as if he were waiting for something to happen. It was a strange, surreal moment, as if time had stopped and there were only the three of us in this charged, quiet space. Noah cleared his throat, which broke the silence. "Do you believe he would object if my breath became trapped in my throat?" I blushed, not sure what he was suggesting, but feeling the weight of it all. My voice was hardly audible as I said, "I don't know." It seemed like the world had shrunk to just Cooper and me, Noah, and every sound seemed louder. Then, as if in unison, Cooper gently but insistently pushed Noah's hand with his nose in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Noah laughed. He constantly tries to chuckle, too, as you can tell by his quiet glance down at Cooper. However, the sound came out strained, my mind racing with ideas I could hardly keep up with. I tried to read Noah's expression, but he simply smiled that same easy, confident smile I'd seen 1,000 times before, but this time it felt different, like an invitation without thinking. I reached out and placed my hand on Cooper's back, close to Noah's, but not quite touching. The space between us felt impossibly small, like a bridge waiting to be crossed, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Noah then leaned a little closer, his hand moving just a fraction of an inch toward mine, my fingers brushing his for a moment, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Cooper looked up at us, his eyes bright and curious as if he could sense the tension building between us. "I think he's okay with it," Noah said quietly. His voice was barely audible, so I nodded, doubting my ability to express anything. There was something honest and raw in his eyes, and I felt like I was being pulled in like a magnet, and for the first time, I didn't want to fight it. I didn't want to keep Cooper back. Sitting there for a long time, the three of us in that quiet, private space, not needing words to understand what was happening, he was a silent witness to whatever was happening. His presence grounded us and allowed us to explore something new, something we hadn't even realized was there. It was as if we had stumbled upon something. "I don't want to mess this up," Noah murmured, leaning back and letting out a deep, steady breath. His voice was soft and sensitive in a manner I hadn't heard before. Fragile, something holy, and neither of us wanted to shatter it at last. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like he was giving us his blessing in that quiet, gentle way only a dog can. I responded, reaching out to touch his shoulder, my hand lingering there for a moment before dropping back to my side. Cooper looked up at me, his eyes warm and understanding, almost as if he were offering his own silent approval. Noah smiled, a genuinely grateful smile that made my heart feel lighter than thanks for everything for not freaking out. I laughed a soft, relieved sound. "Indeed, well, at least it feels that way. It's a little strange, but I believe it's correct." For a bit more, we sat in silence, content with the tension melting away into something cozier, something that seemed like optimism. Cooper lay next to us. As the night wore on, I noticed that something had changed between us that couldn't be undone. It was both exciting and frightening, a promise of something new and real. I knew deep down that whatever happened next, Cooper, Noah, and I would face it together. That evening, Noah returned, but this time, the air between us felt different, heavy with unsaid words and lingering glances. Even Cooper seemed to sense it. He stayed, Noah's head resting on his paws and his tail wagging slowly, as if he were sharing in our joy. I tried to act normal, concentrating on the TV, but my mind kept wandering, and Cooper jumped up when I noticed Noah sitting a little closer than usual, his leg brushing against mine. The touch was so slight, but it sent a shiver up my spine, making my skin tingle. He was watching us with his inquisitive eyes, as if he knew something was changing. Wedging himself between us, his head resting on my lap, he seemed content, his warm weight grounding me and providing a comfort that was both familiar and soothing. However, when Noah shifted, leaning over to pet Cooper, his hand grazed mine and lingered a little too long. I looked up, meeting his gaze, and something changed between us in that moment. Noah's eyes had a quiet intensity that I had never seen before, one that made my heart race. He smiled a soft, almost shy smile, and I felt my cheeks flush. Cooper looked between us, his tail wagging slowly as if he approved of the connection, his presence a silent reassurance that everything was okay. "Would you mind if I used Noah's?" His voice was barely audible as he extended his hand, seemingly to gauge the situation. I nodded, not confident enough to speak, and he put his hand on my shoulder. His gentle and tentative touch felt intimate, a wordless admission of the feelings we'd both been holding back. Cooper nudged my leg with his nose, reminding me that he was still there, a steady presence in this moment of vulnerability. I reached down and scratched behind his ears, and our hands made a simple, natural movement that was both thrilling and reassuring. We sat like that for a while, our hands linking the warmth of his palm against mine, grounding me in a way I hadn't anticipated. I leaned closer, My eyes drifting to Noah's lips, my heartbeat quickening, and he noticed his gaze meeting mine. Cooper seemed to understand, lying quietly beside us, his head resting on my knee as if giving us his silent approval without thinking. For a moment, everything else faded away. The only sound in the room was Cooper's soft breathing next to us, which served as a gentle reminder that we weren't alone. However, at that moment, it felt like it was just the two of us, and Noah leaned in slowly and hesitantly, bringing our faces inches apart. The warmth of his breath against my skin made my heart race with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He paused as if to give me an opportunity to pull away, but I couldn't, and then his lips met mine, soft and tentative, a gentle kiss that sent a shiver through me, arousing a longing I hadn't realized I'd been harboring while our bodies swayed. Noah's hand rested on my shoulder, his fingers grazing my neck, sending electricity coursing through me, and I felt the weight of his touch both gentle and electrifying. It was a moment I wanted to hold on to, a feeling I wanted to keep forever. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. Cooper looked up, his tail thumping gently against the couch as if sharing in our happiness. The kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, filled with warmth that felt both new and familiar. Cooper's nose nudged us as if to remind us of his presence, and we laughed a soft, shared laugh that relieved the tension and brought us back to the moment Noah rested his forehead against mine while his hand remained firmly in mine. I didn't know it would feel like this, he whispered. Our faces flushed, and we both felt a sense of shared understanding. His voice was quiet and full of astonishment. I didn't say that I could hardly speak above a whisper, but I'm happy it does, Cooper. I leaned down and scratched his head as he snuggled closer, his soft hair grazing my calf. I felt a wave of calm wash over me, like everything had come together and I was supposed to be here. Noah smiled a slow, genuine smile, and I felt my heart swell with a warmth that I hadn't felt before he leaned in again, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead, a gesture that was both tender and reassuring. It was a promise. An unspoken vow that we were in this together no matter what. We spent the rest of the evening in a comfortable silence, our hands intertwined, Cooper nestled between us, his steady breathing a soothing presence. It was a moment that felt both timeless and fleeting, a memory that I knew I would carry with me, a reminder of the connection we shared, a bond that had grown deeper than I could have ever imagined as the night wore on. Noah leaned his head against my shoulder, his arm draped around me, a comfortable weight that felt both protective and reassuring. Cooper lay beside us, his body curled against my leg, his presence grounding us in a way that words couldn't. Have been a quite simple moment, but it held a depth that I couldn't put into words, a closeness that felt both new and familiar. We didn't need to speak. We didn't need to fill the silence with words. The connection between us was enough of a shared understanding that transcended language, a bond that had grown stronger with each passing moment. Cooper sighs his warm breath against my leg. I believe this is the beginning of something. Noah raised his head, looking directly into my eyes and smiling softly, a subtle reminder that he was with us and a part of this new chapter in our life. With a serene assurance in his voice, he answered, "Good. I believe so as well," I said. My heart was swollen with hope, a sensation that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Cooper moved closer to me, his head resting on my lap. Silent affirmation of our bond and a reminder that he was with us on this journey. As I looked at Noah, his hands still holding mine, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter that we would face together. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth, the weight of Cooper's presence grounding us in the moment. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, a feeling that I knew I would carry with me, a memory that would stay with me, a reminder of the night when everything changed, and as we sat there, the three of us, I knew that we were bound together. A connection that was beyond words, a bond that would carry us through whatever lay ahead. After that night, it felt surreal. Even the most basic things felt different now, as if they held a deeper meaning, a kind of shared understanding that went beyond words. Cooper was always there, quiet, but a constant reminder of how this all started. It was a late Saturday afternoon when Noah called, his voice light and playful, and Cooper and I were outside. It was as if I were seeing Noah for the first time when I looked at his. "Wanna come along?" I chuckled and looked at Cooper, who was already at the door, wagging as though he had been listening in on you two being anxious. I mocked him, grabbed my coat, and went to meet him. Noah was waiting on the front steps, and a smile came to his face when he saw Cooper rushing and jumping up to him. We decided to take Cooper to the park so that we could simply unwind and let him explore while we took in the fresh air. As we went, our hands touched each other, as if he were attempting to catch the joy that seemed to linger in the air whenever the three of us were together via circles. A silent acknowledgement of the closeness we now shared. It was strange how natural it felt, as if we'd been holding hands all along in the park. There were quite a few families scattered here and there, but mostly empty. Cooper ran ahead, his tail wagging as he sniffed around, content to explore his favorite spots. Noah and I found a quiet corner beneath a large oak tree where we could sit and watch Cooper without interruptions. He stretched out beside me, our shoulders touching, and the familiar comfort of his presence settled over me. Cooper trotted back, lying down with his head on my lap, his eyes drifting closed as I scratched behind his ears. Noah watched us with a soft smile on his face, and I felt a wave of contentment wash over me, as if everything was exactly as it should be. "Remembered when we used to come here after school?" Noah asked, his voice filled with nostalgia. "Yeah," I replied, smiling at the memory. Cooper was just a puppy, then he used to trip over his own paws trying to keep up with us. Noah chuckled, reaching over to pat Cooper's head. "He's grown a lot since then, but he's still our Cooper." As I gazed down at Cooper, I was overcome with love for the dog who had supported us through it all. He had witnessed our best and worst moments. He was a devoted friend who never passed judgment and only ever asked for a warm place to sleep and a scratch behind the ears. Noah grasped my hand and entwined his fingers with mine, causing my heart to flutter. It was such a small gesture, but it spoke a lot. We sat in cozy quiet, admiring the passing of time, happy to be together. After some time, Cooper raised his head. His ears pricked up as he gazed at us, perhaps sensing the change in our relationship. He pressed his nose on my knee, and I leaned down to pat him, feeling really thankful for this moment and the connection we had with Noah and Cooper. Noah drew closer, his head resting on my shoulder, and I had a sensation of warmth that was both familiar and new. Cooper lay next to us, his regular breathing providing a reassuring cadence that helped us stay grounded in the present. I realized that this was more than simply a friendship at this point. I felt a sense of calmness and contentment that I had never realized was possible as the sun started to set, illuminating the park with a golden glow. Noah turned to face me, his eyes gentle, and I knew he felt it too. It was something deeper, something that had been simmering for a long time, waiting for the right moment to come to life. There was no need for words, because everything we wanted to say was already understood. Cooper sighed contentedly, his head resting on my knee, his eyes half closed as he basked in the warmth of the fading sunlight. It was a simple moment, but it held a depth that I couldn't put into words. Noah shifted his fingers, brushing against mine as a gentle reminder of the bond we'd shared. I looked at him with a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, and he leaned in and planted a gentle kiss on my cheek, a gesture that was both tender and reassuring. "Yeah," he said, his voice full of quiet conviction. "Yeah," I replied, my heart swelling with a warmth I didn't know was possible. Cooper let out a soft bark, as if agreeing with us, and we both laughed. The sound reverberated in the quiet park. As the stars started to appear in the sky, it was a simple moment, a memory that I knew I would always have with me, a reminder of the love and friendship that had brought us to this point. Walking home with Cooper trotting beside us and his tail wagging with every step marked a new beginning, a journey we would embark on together, Cooper by our side serving as a constant reminder of the love and friendship that had brought us this far.